All right, let's talk about this update on the fuel crisis. Because if you listen closely, there's a lot more going on here than just a few reassuring words and some statistics. On the surface, everything sounds calm, controlled, almost like the situation's improving nicely. Prices are easing, fewer service stations are running dry, and the government is thanking Australians for doing their part. Sounds good, right? But here's the thing. Once you scratch just a little beneath that surface, the whole story starts to feel a lot less comfortable.
Have shortages today than before Easter, and I'd like to thank every Australian that has played a part in this outcome. However, of course, some shortages do remain, particularly with diesel, and we continue to monitor this very closely. My government will continue to take every action we can to shield Australians from the impact of this war. This includes continuing to shore up our fuel supply. This week, on Thursday, I will head to Singapore for the annual leaders meeting with Prime Minister Lawrence Wong that will take place on Friday. This will be important and will continue discussions on securing our trade in petrol, diesel and LNG. The visit will continue my government's regional engagement that I've been involved with, that Minister Bowen, Minister Wong and others have been engaged with as well, right across the region, including, of course, the Trade Minister, Minister Farrell. Singapore is an important relationship with Australia. And
Before we continue, do us a little favour by subscribing to the channel, because over 98% of you watching haven't subscribed. It costs you nothing, not even a penny, to join this channel. Have you subscribed? Thanks so much.
Because yes, prices might be reducing, but let's be honest, they didn't drop out of nowhere. They dropped because of tax cuts and emergency measures. That's not a natural recovery, that's intervention. It's the government stepping in to soften a blow that already hit hard. And even with that, shortages are still there. Diesel, in particular, is still a problem, and that matters more than people think. Diesel isn't just about trucks, it's about the entire supply chain. If diesel gets tight, everything gets expensive. Food, transport, logistics, all of it. So when you hear some shortages remain, don't brush that off like it's a minor detail. That's a warning sign. Now here's where things start to get really interesting. The Prime Minister announces he's heading to Singapore to secure fuel supply. Pause right there.
Of those clear, close relationships is more important than ever. We don't need to wait for this global crisis to be over. We have to build resilience into the system. We are currently in a secure position, however, engaging with our international partners is an important part of keeping our fuel supply flowing. I'll finish there. Ask Minister Bowen to make some comments, then we'll have to take a few questions.
Thanks very much, PM. Well, a lot of Australians worked very hard over the Easter break to make sure that our fuel was flowing to the regions and to service stations. And despite the fact that demand for petrol and diesel was 30% higher this Easter than last Easter, we continue to see each day the service station outages fall. During the weekend, I held daily press conferences to update on the service station numbers, and happy to do so again this morning. In New South Wales, we have 125 service stations without diesel. That's 5% of the service stations. That's down 17 on yesterday. 34 with no fuel. That's down 5.
Think about what that actually means. Australia, a country rich in natural resources, is flying out to negotiate fuel deals because it needs help securing supply? That's not a flex. That's not diplomacy at its finest. That's a country reacting under pressure. And look, yes, international partnerships are important, nobody is denying that. Having strong relationships with countries in Southeast Asia, with Japan, with South Korea, that's valuable. But let's not pretend this is just routine diplomacy. This trip is happening now, earlier than planned, in the middle of a global crisis because fuel security suddenly became urgent. That's not coincidence, that's urgency. And when leaders start talking about building resilience during a crisis, what they're really saying is, we should have done more before this happened. That's the uncomfortable truth. Now, to be fair, the government is trying to show that things are under control. You've got detailed breakdowns of fuel availability, percentages of service stations affected, and how supply is holding steady. On paper, it looks reassuring. But let's put it into perspective. Even after all the efforts, there are still hundreds of service stations without diesel. That's not nothing. That's not just a blip. That's a sign that the system is under strain. And yes, supply levels are being maintained, but they're being maintained because fuel is coming in as fast as it's going out. That's not stability. That's a balancing act. It's like trying to keep a bucket full while there's a hole in the bottom. As long as you keep pouring water in, it looks fine. But the moment something disrupts that flow, you've got a problem. And that's exactly why this situation feels so fragile. Now, let's talk about the messaging, because this is where things get a bit polished. There's a lot of emphasis on Australians doing the right thing, not panic buying, not over-consuming, acting responsibly. And sure, that deserves credit. People didn't lose their heads, they kept things steady. But at the same time, it also subtly shifts part of the responsibility onto the public, like, hey, things are stable because everyone behaved. But here's a question. Should the stability of a country's fuel supply depend on people restraining themselves? Or should it be built on a system that can actually handle demand without needing everyone to tiptoe around it? Because those are two very different situations. Now, zooming out a bit, the Prime Minister keeps pointing to global factors: the Middle East conflict, international instability, supply chain disruptions. And that's fair. Those are real issues. They're affecting economies everywhere. But here's where it gets tricky. Global crises expose weaknesses. They don't create them out of nowhere. If your system is strong, you absorb the shock. If it's fragile, you feel every hit. And right now, Australia looks like it's feeling every hit. That's why this whole conversation about resilience keeps coming up. Because deep down, there's an acknowledgement that the system isn't as strong as it should be. And now, in the middle of all this, there's also talk about the upcoming budget. And you can already tell things are shifting. Plans are being adjusted, timelines are being pushed, decisions are being reconsidered. That's what happens when a crisis forces your hand. You start rethinking priorities. You start balancing ambition with reality. And suddenly, all those big plans you had, they need to fit into a much more complicated world. The Prime Minister says ambition hasn't been diminished, but let's be real, it's definitely being tested. Because you can't ignore a situation like this. You can't pretend everything's going according to plan when you're dealing with supply concerns, international negotiations, and economic pressure all at once. Now here's the part that really stands out to me. There's a lot of talk about partnerships, relationships, cooperation, all important, no doubt, but there's very little direct acknowledgement of how Australia ended up in a position where it needs those partnerships this urgently. That's the missing piece. Because this isn't just about managing a crisis, it's about understanding why the crisis feels this intense in the first place. And until that conversation happens honestly, these updates are always going to feel incomplete, like you're getting part of the story but not the full picture. And that's why people are skeptical, because they're not just listening to what's being said, they're reading between the lines. They're noticing the urgency behind the calm tone. They're noticing the gap between reassurance and reality. And they're asking themselves, is this really under control? Or is this just being managed for now? That's the question that hasn't been fully answered yet. And honestly, it's the one that matters most. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the situation is actually stabilising? Or does this feel like a temporary fix to a deeper problem? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's get into it. And if you want more breakdowns like this, where we go beyond the headlines and actually unpack what's going on, make sure you like, subscribe, and stay tuned. Because if this situation has shown us anything, it's that the real story is never just what's said at the podium.